That's great. I can see you all, and Alex will join us in a minute. So you can just hang there and we'll start in about 5 minutes. And I've got you as well. Thanks, Alex.
Hi everybody and welcome to our latest session. My name is Alex Turner from the Business Desk and I'll be hosting our session on funding the next wave of entrepreneurs and disruptors for the next 40 minutes. Pandemic disruption, as we know, has created new opportunities as well as uncertainties for Northern startups and SMEs. We're going to look at how the region can ensure these businesses can grow and get the funding that they require to fulfill their potential, which will be hugely important during the post-pandemic recovery. We've got a great panel to bring you their insight and experience this afternoon. So I'm delighted to be joined by Stewart Haworth, Director at OakNorth Bank, Grant Peggie, Director at the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, Shaz Sulaman, founder of Solid Bond Capital, and Jon Geldart, from who is the Director General of the Institute of Directors. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Just before I speak to our panel, just to flag up, we've got the chat window on the right-hand side. Do feel free to put in any questions or comments that you have, and I'll look to weave those in and put them to the panel as we go through the next 40 minutes. So if I could kick things off, if I could just ask each of you, just very briefly, just to explain where you fit in the funding landscape. And Stewart, if I could start with you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So, Stewart Haworth, Director, Debt Finance at OakNorth. We're a senior lender providing growth capital for SMEs in the UK.
Great, thank you. Grant?
Grant Peggie from the British Business Bank, responsible for the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. We have £250 million to invest in small businesses across the North.
Thank you. Shaz?
Hi, Shaz Sulaman from Sulaman Capital. We run our own private fund and help early stage founders in that gap between angel investing and first institutional money, whether it's in the EIS fund or otherwise. So basically providing runway cash on their idea.
Great. And Jon, you have a slightly different perspective, but if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Sure, no, thanks. My name's Jon Geldart, and I'm the Director General of the Institute of Directors in the UK. So we represent over 20,000 directors and work very closely with government, and have done throughout the period of the pandemic, and previously continue to do so. I'm looking at how to support SME directors in particular, as how they can benefit from the services we offer, but also because of the close connection we have with government, we've been very much involved in some of the machinations behind the funding support from government to business.
Great, thank you. And Ben, our event support manager, has just flagged up. If you do have questions, make sure you're in session chat and not event chat, and we'll be able to spot them in there. So, Shaz, if I could start with you. You know, it's almost a cliche, isn't it, that disruption creates opportunities. You know, and I don't think many of us have experienced a year quite as disruptive as the year we've just had. Are you seeing that next wave of entrepreneurs and business ideas come through?
Yes, we are actually. So I do believe, I mean, the activity we've had over 2020 never slowed down. We had just as many, if not more, people looking for funding and coming up with ideas. And I saw it as a bit of a mix between people disrupting and coming up with things around the pandemic and what turned the new normal maybe, and just other businesses that were very robust and they were still looking to continue to grow. So yes, I would say it definitely is the case, and it's a very busy scene at the moment, and a lot of help is required.
Grant, what's your experience been of the last 12 months? Have you seen a different sort of mix of people coming forward?
It's been a mixture, Alex. I think, you know, at the start of the pandemic, the focus was very much on survival, getting funding to help with cash flow, working capital. I think what we've seen over the last few months is sort of people are more interested now in growth. They can see light at the end of the tunnel, and we're certainly seeing a lot more interest in people who want to start up in new business, whether that's through economic necessity because they've been made redundant, because they want to take a change in direction. But certainly the last 2 quarters for us have been record quarters in terms of investing money across the North.
Yeah. And Stewart, are you seeing that this same level? Are you seeing a greater interest and a greater appetite for growth capital?
Yeah, definitely so. I think I guess there's 2 points there. As we come out of as we come into the recovery phase, then I think people are going to want to kind of get the turnover levels back up to where they were pre-COVID, and that will necessitate funding requirements to do that. And I think the other aspect there as well is, you know, we've been through the CGT that never was, and I guess what that has done is that's really focused entrepreneurs' minds in terms of, actually, is this the right time to sell the business? Is this the right time for management to come through, to take control of the reins, to take the business in a different direction, as opposed to another cycle of building the business back up. And I think really what we've seen is a lot of transactions in the first quarter of this year, and so far we see that continuing. So I guess we've got the two sides there. We've got the kind of the transactional, the corporate transactions happening, and a lot of discussion there. And I guess the tax change points will not go away, certainly in the short term. But then there are opportunities for businesses in certain sectors to want to grow, and I guess through that, in other sectors that have been harder hit, then to consolidate their own position from a market perspective. So we do see, I guess, as Shaz says, and as Grant said already, that through disruption there are opportunities.
Yeah, and just to add a bit more detail on the CGT, so the capital gains tax, there was, I think I'm right saying, there was a report into the Chancellor Rishi Sunak that suggested that CGT rates should be increased in line with income tax, which caused an awful lot of nervousness, and then curiously just didn't get mentioned at the budget, and nobody quite knows if the idea has gone away or if it will just come back at a different time. Jon, how disruptive is it to directors to have this, uncertainty around capital gains tax sort of hanging over them?
Well, I think there's it's not the only thing that makes life difficult for directors. So it's one of a myriad of things that are present themselves to directors this time that increases uncertainty. I think actually there was nothing in the we had tax day yesterday, and there was nothing in that either that indicated, at least from our reading of it, that capital gains tax matter was either going to go away or, more importantly, was going to come to fruition in the short term. So we might see something in the autumn budget, but the general tonality of where the Chancellor is coming from, and talking to HMT as well, is that somebody's going to have to pay, and at the end of the day, I think we all recognise that's going to be business one way or the other. We saw Sunak put the horizon out there in a couple of years' time for increases in corporation tax. Interestingly, that's going to be not just before a new election. So who knows, if the economy does bounce back, that gives him some latitude to be able to maybe defray that. But I think whilst of course there's uncertainty in terms of how directors are looking at that particular matter, I would share others' commentary, which is we've seen significant increase, in fact, over last year in the number of potential deals and acquisitions going on. So there are a lot of deals around, and a lot of that's down to the amount of capital that's still available. Clearly a lot of organisations and individuals have had a terrible time in the last year. But I think it was Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. And we're certainly finding that a lot of our members, and I think this is seen through the banks as well, and lenders, looking differently at the marketplace and looking at opportunities that come from adversity. There are distressed businesses out there regrettably, but there are also opportunities that come from businesses that have had to pivot to a very different kind of dynamic. The EU as well, of course, our departure with Brexit has also caused uncertainty. We've seen actually 20% of our members in a recent poll just decide not to continue, those who were to continue to deal with Europe. That doesn't mean they're going to stop exporting. That means they're going to stop exporting to Europe. So a lot of domestic demand increasing. And we've seen a fundamental shift, I think, in the way that people are looking at businesses and indeed themselves, and what they are going to take out of their business in the future.
Yeah, Grant, does the uncertainty that we've all lived through make it harder to assess the viability of the businesses that come to you for funding?
It does. It is a challenge. What we do know is there's a lot of debt out there, a lot of businesses carrying sort of, whether it's bounce back loans or CBILS. So we do know there are some challenges there, but also there's the opportunity for business to restructure, to refinance. I think the government measures, not just in terms of the financial support, but things like the furlough scheme have given businesses some stability. So it is a challenge. And what I think we will see, perhaps as we come out of the pandemic, is sort of more interest in equity and quasi-equity as businesses look to fund growth more appropriately, perhaps, than using traditional debt. Yeah.
And Shaz, I think one of the things that I hear quite often is that while it's can be relatively easy for well-performing businesses to get funding, it can be difficult for pre-revenue and early-stage businesses to get backing. What's your view of that landscape?
Yeah, I think it hasn't really changed that much during this period, especially in the pandemic. So they have the same challenges, which they need somebody to support them, understand their specific challenges. And we're seeing this, early stage. They may get some friends and family, some angel money, but the real problem is around, well, I haven't gone further enough in my journey. I haven't established enough things. I think I'm onto something good. Opportunities could come my way, but I need somebody to fund them back that and give them enough runway cash. So I think you have people specifically looking to say, well, how do I take advantage of the situation we're in, and tailoring their ideas towards that, but not necessarily that they found themselves in any different position, because it's quite difficult, and it's quite the whole landscape is actually very disjointed and broken. So I think there's a gap to be filled, and I see that gap being bigger in the north than it is in the south.
What do you think causes that gap to be bigger here?
I think from what I've seen so far is that there's a bit more established companies or individuals or groups of individuals who have funded startups, particularly pre-revenue or MVP stage. And here, there doesn't seem to be as many people joined up on that. I think it's definitely improving. So what somebody classes as a startup, whether it's an EIS fund that puts in £1 million into a startup, for a founder at the beginning of their journey, they're thinking, I'm way down the line before I could even get to that. So I think it's also the definition of the startup as well by people. So we are certainly in that, the founder stage, where they need to take their ideas, seed the idea, and then actually have enough runway cash to prove things for other people to join along that line. So and the other thing I would add to it is that I think, there's too many people looking for like the complete finished article of a person or founders, and I think that as more and more businesses are seeded around this area, I think, and an alumni happens and people can share on their experiences, there's going to be a gap, and we in particular don't mind that. I mean, we still need very clever, hard-working, determined, imaginative founders, but we also accept that they haven't been in fundraising before, they may not have known certain things. So we're looking to provide support around those areas that they may have gaps in, to help support them rather than detract from their abilities.
Yeah, Stewart, OakNorth are regionally focused, aren't they? So do you see an existing gap in the market that you're looking to fill?
Yeah, in particular, we call it internally, we call it the missing middle, and I guess this is so OakNorth was established 2015 by two entrepreneurs, and that was as a direct result of their struggles to scale their business. So in their mind, they had a good management team, good cash flows, and a good business. But what they couldn't do is get through that. They couldn't get through the various layers of a high street bank to get to the point where someone actually would take them seriously and really give them the capital to grow. So it was all a bit piecemeal, and it felt like they were refinancing every time they got to the next stage. And that's been their focus, really. So we call it the missing middle. I guess it's cash flow funding for businesses up to 10 million is our sweet spot, and that will be for growth capital and to really accelerate growth. So where Shaz comes in and will really support, get a business through the systems and the management and implementation, and get that business to revenue and profitability and cash flow. We'll then really look to take it from that point, really up the scale to probably in most instances into a private equity transaction or a trade sale or some sort of future event. And that's what we're focused on. So we really focus on cash flows within the businesses, and we really focus ourselves on providing flexible and bespoke solutions that are tailored to the business to enable them to effectively reinvest the cash that's generated to really turbocharge that growth.
Talking of segments that are perhaps underrepresented or not helped enough, got a question from Sally Penny, which I'll put to you, John. She's asking, are we seeing an increase in female entrepreneurs and disruptors?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and I think that's to be really welcomed. And I think that people may not realise that I'm actually not sitting in London as the Institute Directors. I'm sitting up in Yorkshire, so I've got a very northern perspective. And prior to this role, I was actually very much involved in the north of England, but also in China. So I spent the last 10 years in China before I took this job. And the reason for saying about that is about entrepreneurial spirit and a very different way of looking at things is something I've seen, if even within China, because I think that it's about attitude. And we know for every dimension you care to mention, women on boards and women in business add diversity and breadth and depth to organisations and to, if you like, the business ecosphere that is essential for the development of growth and energising and, if you like, driving the economy. So we're seeing a significant number. You probably sort of see the IOD has been a bit male, pale, and stale. No longer the case. Certainly not on my watch. We're looking very much to working with women's groups, developing our connectivity between women to women. And part of the work we do is around mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring through our kind of connectivity that we have at a branch level, at a local level. And seeing women entrepreneurs coming forward. I think one of the issues is that often there's not the sufficient support for women. It tends to be women on women support. And that's good and that's important, but it's also incumbent on us all to actually, and this is not just about women, but a wider diversity of intent, I think, is to give every possible business leader the opportunity to shine. And I think that's not only from a capital point of view and investment of capital, but also mentoring and supporting people, certainly as they come onto that first rung or a couple of first rungs on the ladder. That's when people need the most support. And that's what we certainly look to support them with, before they necessarily go to funders. Where can I go locally? There's lots of funding available locally. Many people don't know that, and through local government, etc. And that's certainly we're seeing something happen. And I think long may it continue in terms of the increase in women coming into business across the UK.
Good. Grant, have you seen over recent years a shift or an increase in the number of women-led businesses that are looking to grow and seek funding?
Absolutely, and it's not just in the sort of traditional areas. We are seeing more female entrepreneurs looking for sort of equity investment, looking to have innovation-led businesses. And I think, just sort of turning to the other part of the question, I think the key thing for us is to use examples and case studies, highlight the female entrepreneurs that we have backed, get them to speak to other women. It's better than me speaking to them about their journey. And also working with some of the ecosystem that exists. We're proud that we've worked with the Northern Power Women organisation, and Sue Bernard, who's one of the bank employees who sort of looks after the Northwest, has been very active and indeed was nominated for an award. But we also have Mel Elyard, who covers the Yorkshire, Humber and Tees Valley, who's very much focused on going out, finding networks, finding female entrepreneurs and making sure they get plugged in to the right support. I guess one of the challenges we do face is the sort of what I would call investment ready, and this applies equally to male entrepreneurs. Do they know what the right type of finance is they should be seeking? Do they know how to access it? Do they know what investors are looking for? So it's not just about the supply of finance. I think it's also about supporting entrepreneurs, female and male, with sort of investment readiness support and making sure that they've got the right information at the right time.
Yeah. Shaz, on that point about it being investment ready, what can the North entrepreneurs do to improve their attractiveness to funders?
I think it really does depend on the stage that you're at. So if you're already revenue generating, looking at the data, and then knowing how to put together your story. One of the things that we see often is founders believe they've got to tell the beginning and the end of the story in one go. And actually, they've got to realize that, look, over a number of steps, you're going to have to convince people that you're onto something. You can't be afraid of that journey. If you're being challenged and you're being made to be uncomfortable in the right way, accept that and understand that, because you can learn from that. So I think getting investment ready for those is having people alongside them that can, instead of letting them make the mistakes, they can go, these are the kind of things that you should be looking at. These are the kind of challenges you'll get. This is the kind of things you need to prove. But don't be afraid of putting yourself out there in that journey to say, look, we want to do this over the next 6 or 9 months. And at the end of that, when we've proven something, we want to come to you or another and say, well, we want to do this over the next 12 months. You tend to go, right, we're starting here. And by the way, in 5 years' time, we're going to be here. And everyone goes, yeah, but there's a big space in the middle that you need. And then there's that bit. And then the other part is pre-funding. You know, getting ready for that is very difficult, because part of that is very subjective on who you're talking to a meeting and their risk appetite. But at the same time, there are a number of things you can do that can help the person who's looking to fund what that is. We work on a very simple land, expand, explode model, where we really home in early doors on where have you landed? Why have you landed on this idea? What made you come up with it? What proofs have you got? What evidence? Who have you spoken to? All of those things that really home in on that, and then go on to, okay, now why is it commercial now? And again, what evidence have you got? What proofs have you spoken to? And finally, why is it you? What are your skill sets that make you believe that you can exploit this good idea that is commercial? And really, that plus some modelling, there's not a lot more you can do, because until they get on with it, they can't prove anything. So spending time there and really getting to know them and the founders, and what are their gaps? You know, some might be great at marketing but not great at tech. Some might be brilliant at debt writing. I can tell you now that the business that I've had most success with had the worst deck that I've ever seen, and the financial model wasn't great. But having spent some time with them, it didn't take long for us to make a decision to invest. And I've got to say, out of the 4 or 5 years I've been doing this, that business has gone from taking investment from us in November to last Friday closing a £2 million final seed round. So they had all of the raw ingredients there. They just didn't know how to put it together. So I think having more people willing to help at that stage and recognizing the gaps that they may have without saying, well, this is a reflective of their ability. It's just they don't know what they don't know.
I think that's a really interesting example of, I think, the speed of growth that businesses can have, particularly, you know, technology-led businesses, which many of these are. But Grant, do you think there's a problem with follow-on funding sometimes across the north?
I think that's right. I think the research released by the Business Bank a couple of weeks ago showed that if you are in the Golden Triangle, it's much easier to access follow-on funding. You know, there are interventions. The NPIF can support businesses seeking up to 2 million, but it is much harder to get follow-on funding. I don't think the pandemic has particularly helped in that situation. I think some investors will sit on their hands, or they will focus much more on the existing portfolio and making sure the portfolio gets through the pandemic, rather than seeking new investments or you know, following on. So I think there is a challenge. Certainly, you know, if we look ahead for the Northern Powers Investment Fund 2, which we're hoping to be successful with, we want that fund to have much more flexibility in terms of the amounts of funding it can provide, particularly for follow-on funding, to make sure that we are addressing the gap, and when our rules aren't set, you know, sort of by Europe, which in an arbitrary So that's our focus, to make sure we develop something which is appropriate, and those great innovative businesses across the north get the funding they need. What the bank is doing is working on a new intervention. The Future Fund was very important in terms of helping equity businesses through the pandemic. What we are looking at now is for those companies who are really scaling up, who may need 20 million, the sort of Silicon Valley, the US type companies. So we are developing a new intervention called Future Fund Breakthrough, which will help businesses across the UK with that sort of Series C, that really sort of large amount of funding that they need to scale up and to be really global, to address some of the differences that we have in the UK and the US. But definitely there is a challenge, and it's been exacerbated in the north in terms of follow-on funding.
Yeah. It's curious, how does OakNorth help entrepreneurs and businesses get that follow-on funding and really accelerate through their growth journey?
Yeah, well, it's all linked to the business and the management plan. So I mean that's our starting point. We'll speak to them. We'll have a look at where they are today and where the journey is going to take them. And I think what we try and do is tailor a solution to their cash flows, and that allows that reinvestment, or that allows that transaction to take place, that allows growth. And by doing that and being bespoke, kind of in the one end being bespoke, but then on the other hand being quick as well, because I think with all of this stuff there's a speed, and we talk around some of the access to funding sometimes, and some of the challenges that being investment ready poses is some of it is real, and I think some of it is kind of tick box, and sometimes we fall into this tick box mentality that, as Shaz was saying before, there's hearts and minds, and sometimes the human element of it is taken out because the numbers aren't presented in the right way or in the right format. And I think that's where we can really try and help by getting under the skin of businesses and trying to support their growth. And in most cases, that is including supporting the management team and the second tier structures that support, because it's not just supporting the product growth or the working capital growth, it's supporting the infrastructure that sits behind that. And that normally for us comes on the back of a good platform, but a journey that might take them 10 years that they can accelerate in 5 with a more flexible funding structure. And it's just being able to have that conversation with them and allow a business to do that then gets them to where they want to be on their journey a little bit quicker.
John, we've talked there about how the North entrepreneurs can improve their attractiveness to funders, but how do you think the North funders can improve their attractiveness to entrepreneurs?
That's a very good question. I think that the guys have kind of said it really. You've got ready and willing funders. There's no doubt that if you look across the north, there is actually enough money around. I mean, this might sound strange, but there isn't actually enough money around. It's connecting that money with great ideas, and often I think, and it's not a criticism at all. It is just what it is, because it's so complicated. A lot of potential businesses or businesses looking for funding don't know where to go. And we've seen a whole suite of initiatives come together in order to try to, if you like, point people in the right direction. From the LEP to local government. I mean, there's a whole lot of people trying to do that. And I think that's the issue. There is money there. There are willing people to support and help entrepreneurs, as we've seen demonstrated just here today. But I think that's where connecting locally is a really great way of making sure that you're locked in and you're actually sort of there and understand what the opportunities might be. And again, that's sort of looking at local groups. I mean, we happen to do one, the IOD, but there are other organisations as well that put people next to people and create access points where the introductions can be made to the types of funders that are sitting around this virtual table. So I would encourage people who are looking for funding, get yourself connected and then ask. So many people don't ask. They think that somehow it's they'll never find the funding, or they're a bit uncertain about whether they've got a great idea, or they're thinking about spinning out. They're not sure where to go. And that's just simply about asking. And I'm sure the guys around the table would agree that if people come to you and ask, then you're more than willing to point people in the right direction. It may not be for you. You may not be the funder that's going to do it, but the ecosystem is there, and I think people are very quick to pass people on. So I think the question that I would have is around, you know, how can people better get connected? It's not just the funders' problem. It's people looking for money as well need to get connected too.
Yeah, well, Shaz, if I put Jon's question to you, how do you think we get people better connected and more quickly?
I think it is starting to happen more. I mean, I've been involved in something that the likes of Procura Ventures, who are an EAS fund, and they've got a number of people together, including Business Bank, and just talking about how do we connect. So I think it's incumbent on the funders to get together and say, well, how do we work with each other so that when we recognise and see somebody to say, well, it's not quite for us, but I think these guys could really help. I think that could work. And then more opportunities for funders, for founders to get together, whether it's through accelerators or through networking events, where they can, you know, talk about their ideas, maybe even swap some war stories, etc. And I think creating somewhere for them to go, not just a pitch, because I think that's, you know, the end of the cycle, but almost like to how you incubate that thought mentality has got to come from both sides. But within that, one of the things you are looking for is founders that have got some tenacity and determination to find a way forward. You know, you are looking for people that have got that ability to deal with some of the adversity ahead of them. What you don't want to do is put unnecessary obstacles in their way. So I think it's going to be a combination of those things. But we are seeing some interesting things already happening within the region on that basis.
Yeah, and Grant, I suppose, you know, the raison d'etre of the Northern Paris Investment Fund is to give, you know, clear funding to the regions, and you know, there's several sort of funds and pots within the overall fund to give that breadth of options to businesses. Does that make it easier for entrepreneurs who are seeking to grow their businesses to effectively know where to start?
I think that's the point, is that it doesn't matter where you enter the system, you do get signposted to the right support. So, you know, as was said, we may, you know, our fund may not be right for you, but it's about connecting you to the right support. And I think one of the things that we have learned, you know, this is the sort of fourth year of the Northern Powers Fund, is that you have to keep at it. It's not a one-off action. You have to keep on going out, go to the places where businesses meet, you know, sort of leverage off other activities, but also looking at the ecosystem, you know, making sure the accountants, the corporate financiers, the brokers are aware of the support that's available. And then working with our partners in local enterprise partnerships and growth hubs. But the point should be that it doesn't matter where you enter the system, you should get the right support, even if that means you're not investment ready and you need to do a bit of work, if you need a bit of coaching, a bit of mentoring. So absolutely, that is an integral part. And sorry about the plug, Alex, but you know, the website is a good way to get into it. www.npif.co.uk. That will help you get into the system and get you the support you need.
I think, Grant, sorry, I was going to follow on that. I think one thing that we have to be careful and mindful of is, and I've seen this happen a lot with founders, is there are a number of organisations that have a set of rules. So these are my investment criteria. We only come in at this level, or it's government money, or it's however it is. But what I have found is either to not miss out or to understand more. You have founders, especially early stage, and I'm talking about that kind of MVP or pre-revenue. There's too many of the organisations that spend too long with these founders and actually really frustrate them. So they take them through a process that seems to be never ending. They don't realise that they've got a lot of hope on their shoulders because you're still in conversation with them. But when we meet them, we can look at it and go, there's absolutely no chance they're investing whatsoever. But they don't know, as a first-time founder who's not been through it before, they're just so hopeful for it. So I think there's a little bit of duty of care to be done when you are managing a fund, managing somebody else's money. Maybe there is some element of tick boxing going on. How many people have I seen? How many, where you've got to really put that emotional connection forward and say, look, these guys they're really getting their hopes up that you've had this dialogue going for 6-7 weeks, when actually everyone knows that at the end of that, they're not going to do it, and I don't really know the reasons why that happens. And I've come across a lot of people in a very short space of time, as I've focused in the north, that have had that happen to them.
Yeah, well, as you were talking, there were lots of people nodding along. Grant, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with Shaz. It's much better for everybody to be told no up front and not to lead people along. However, the flip side, and I would say this is, I know of at least one company, a software company up in Tees Valley, where it's taken them 3.5 years to get from the stage where the first conversation's taken place to when the actual investment has happened, because sometimes it is a journey. It should never be. It should either be no up front or not now, but these are the things you have to do to do that. So it can be a journey, and it can be a lengthy journey sometimes for entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. Stuart, if I could put my final question to you. Given that we're focused on the post-pandemic recovery, what are you most optimistic about for the year or two ahead?
I think the recovery will be great. Personally, I think we're seeing still a lot of momentum in requests for funding, and primarily what we see is that recovery funding. It's for growth, it's for reinvestment, it's for driving transactions, whether that be new management teams forward. So I'm really positive as we sit here right now in terms of where we're going. You can never say there might not be another bump in the road along the way, but I think most people are now really gearing back up for that, having put behind them the last 12 months, and are really looking forward to driving forward in the next 12 months and getting back the business is what they had.
That's a great point to end on. For those of you who are listening, who want to have those conversations and make those connections about how you grow your business, Grant and his team and some of the team from NPIF are in the Expo area under the Mercia banner, or you can connect directly through the People tab. Same with Stewart and the OakNorth team, and Jon and the IOD are in the Expo area as well. So do hop over and join them. Also, just to flag up in a couple of minutes, a session on creating unicorns will be getting underway with Matt Moulding from the Hook Group. So he's going to be explaining his journey and his sort of entrepreneurial vision, along with a couple of other really exciting Northern entrepreneurs. And then later on at 4:30, we've got a brief short session on supporting SMEs amidst the pandemic, which Stuart will be reappearing on. So do join us for one or both of those. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day at Invest North. Oh, and finally, thank you very much to Grant, Shaz, Stuart, and Jon for your insights and contributions. It's been a really interesting discussion. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.